I am thrilled to introduce our second speaker, Sreya, and her talk, Reddit to Resilience, on Shouldering the Burden of a Legacy. Sreya is a first-year medical student at in the MD-PhD program. She earned a BA in biology and a BA in history from the New Jersey Institute of Technology in 2022. Since graduating, she has worked at the NIH for 1 year before matriculating to RWJMS. She is a member of the Ultrasound A Cappella Group, Disc Saheli Project, and chair of the MD-PhD Events Committee. Her spare time is filled with cooking up a storm, playing with her cat Pickle, and embroidery. Please give it up for Sreya.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me. When I first saw the MedTalk application this year, I was a little hesitant to apply. I wondered what possible insights could I have as an M1. But I thought a little bit more deeply about what I really needed to hear now that I was entering medical school, what other people might be struggling with, and really why I came to medical school in the first place. There's a common cliche about casualties in medical school personal statements. If not mortality, then at least morbidity of someone close to the applicant. This cliche exists for a reason. Many of us have had experiences with grief, fear, and anxiety about the health of a loved one. I'm here today to talk about how these experiences and emotions can drive students in both good and bad ways, and how to balance these emotions with the rigors of medical education. My own experience starts, innocently enough, with a bedtime story. When I was 4, I already had a pretty good idea of what my parents did. If you asked me, I would say that my dad was a heart doctor and my mom was a cancer doctor. So one day when she was tucking me into bed and she was telling me about her day, I started to get a little unsure about what she was really doing. She described how her patients got sicker and sicker after rounds of chemotherapy, radiation, and big surgeries. As the physician who was recommending all of this treatment, in my mind, she sort of started to seem like the villain in this narrative. But I knew her, and I liked her a lot, so I wanted to give her a chance. I asked, "What's so bad about cancer anyway?" Her knowing laugh and kind explanation about cells gone rogue put my mind at ease, that she really was the hero for fighting these bad cells that were trying to take over her innocent patients' bodies. This is a picture of us, and 5 years later, she was picking me up from my first ever sleepover in 4th grade. I was super, super excited. When she pulled up the car, she told me that she wanted to give me an update about this lump in her armpit that she had gotten checked out recently. But at the time, honestly, I was a little bit more excited about the news for my sleepover. I started chattering about how we had stayed up really late, we had eaten just total garbage, and watched a bunch of trashy movies. But from her responses and the tone of her voice, I realized that maybe her news was a little bit more important. So I stopped chattering so much, and I listened intently as she told me that she had gastric cancer. At the time, I didn't quite understand how stomach cancer could be in her armpit or what any of that had to do with her lingering cold, but I would have those questions answered later. In that moment, just to grasp what was going to happen, all I could ask was, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is this news? I will never forget the look in her eyes when she said, 8. Even with treatment, my doctors think that I only have about a year left to live. I want to pause here and say that everyone's experience with grief looks different. For some, there are years and even decades of health decline in a loved one, and for others, just one fateful day can change the course of their life. For me, the next 2 years were spent struggling to understand dinner table conversations about different chemotherapy regimens, potential surgeries, and the benefits of palliative care. The end of her life was painful and seared into my mind forever. But more poignant still was the knowledge that at every stage she knew exactly what was happening to her. She continued to practice as a hematologist-oncologist until just 6 months before her death, speaking compassionately with patients every single day about their fears and their experiences with treatment, knowing all the while that she was going through the exact same thing. Losing a parent at any age is hard, but for me, I felt a deep calling to dedicate my life to preserving her memory. And here's where my story starts to dovetail into all of those medical school personal statements. You can say it with me. I liked science, I really wanted to help people, and I really cared about honoring my late mother's legacy. After her loss, I felt an intense pressure to join the fight against cancer and to become a successful physician and researcher. Everyone who knew me wondered if I really could make it into medicine, but also if my pursuit of oncology was just a way for me to relive some of the most difficult moments in my life over and over again. But that's the funny thing about loss. In my mind, it acted like a prism, clarifying exactly what I needed to do in order to honor her memory. Over time, this pressure to achieve built and built, becoming an actual burden that I'm sure many of us here have felt, where with every action that I took, I doubted if what I was doing was enough for her. At this point in my life, everything just turned into a checklist that just seemed endless. The moment that I achieved any small modicum of success, I immediately mentally moved my goalposts further and made it just that bit more difficult to feel that what I was doing was enough to fulfill my mother's legacy. Of course, in my neurotic fear that everything I was doing was subpar, I turned to the worst place possible for solace: Reddit. Here, I found ceaseless ways to measure myself up against other people and come up short in a cruelly repetitive cycle. What I wish that I could tell myself back then is that my idea of living up to my mother's legacy just by achieving X, Y, and Z was wrong. That being tough and resilient shouldn't come at the expense of really feeling the loss. That no amount of academic achievement or success could change what had happened. I thought more deeply about the hedgehog's dilemma, which is that the closer two hedgehogs become, the more deeply they hurt each other. And I realized, in some ways, I was being a hedgehog. I was being spiky and tough and pushing everyone away. And I realized that I was on the wrong path. In order to become the compassionate physician that my mother was and the oncologist that I hoped to be, the best thing I could do would be to embrace my own vulnerability and my experiences rather than continuing to toughen myself up and harden myself in order to contain all of this self-imposed internal pressure. If anyone resonates with my experiences, I want you to know that your loved one just wants you to be happy and fulfilled. Forgive yourself for what you didn't know back then, and give yourself the grace to learn what you can right now, in school, in the clinic, and in life. The people who have driven you to become who you are today wouldn't want the cost of your success to be continuous torment over what you could have achieved or what you could have done differently. Of course, everyone is different, but I want to share some ways that I have tried to break this cycle of feeling like everything I'm doing isn't enough to fulfill my mother's legacy. I found a lot of solace in journaling, in giving myself the room to really, really vent. something that's been really helpful for me has actually been to write out my worst worries and fears rather than letting them play in a loop endlessly in my head. Second, and this may surprise you, but I have improved my relationship with Reddit and the general genre of comparisons. To me, information is power, and knowing what can be achieved and what can be done gives me some comfort, but at the same time, I always give myself permission to log off when it's no longer serving me and to only explore what really gives me energy. That way, my life is less checklist ad infinitum and more like an adventure with side quests. Finally, I have found a lot of comfort in literally unshouldering the burden, like our friend Atlas here, of having to be the only one doing work in my mother's name. I founded a charity and scholarship to support other women interested in cancer research because I realized that the more people pushing the field of oncology further, the better. And that way, I don't have to be the only one doing work in honor of my late mother. I want to close with the impact that these losses can have on generations. On the left-hand side is a picture of my mother learning anatomy in medical school. On the right-hand side is a picture of my family. All four of us have done, or like me, are in training to be physicians. At the same time, this is a picture of a dearly beloved lost loved one and their family. As physicians, my parents were treated with a high level of respect and empathy throughout my mother's disease process. And as future physicians, it's important for us to try and extend that courtesy to all of our patients, even during stressful periods. What I want the takeaway from my story to be is that if you relate to these experiences, you're not alone. The people who you loved and who loved you just want you to be happy and fulfilled. You are doing the very best you can, and that is more than enough. When you enter a patient's room and see their family and understand that they're dealing with grief and loss, treat them as you would your own as much as you can. Your interactions with children like me can make the difference in someone's life and inspire them to pursue medicine and science. After all, it was the clarity from my mother's physicians that allowed me to pursue oncology without fear and stand before you all here today. Finally, if you're feeling stressed, if you're nervous, if you're worried about your future, in that very moment, do not go on Reddit. It never, ever, ever ends well.